Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Games number 299, where we are going to go over a bunch of game industry news with three people we don't normally have on a podcast together. So this is going to be fun. So hi, I'm Jen Donahoe, Strategic Marketing Consultant at Beta Hat and Jade Inferno. Today we have Laura Taranto, Senior Director of Product at Big Fish Games.
Hello, hello.
And Adam Telfer, product guy extraordinaire, with an announcement.
I do have an announcement. So I can actually announce where I'm going now. So I started a new role, started Monday actually. So I'll be VP of Product Slate Strategy at Scopely. So I'm pretty excited. Scopely's product culture is second to none. So I do have a caveat before I go into more podcasts and come back to the podcast in the future, is that I don't represent Scopely when I'm on the podcast. This is my own views, and I will not be covering their games. I will not be covering their perspectives. I'm just going to recuse myself from any topic that relates to Scopely and its games, but I'm still able to join as long as I'm representing myself.
Awesome. All right. So we'll be sure to pepper you about Monopoly Go Further, Scrabble Go, anything else. Yeah.
And then I'm just going to go off camera and scream into a pillow on the side while you do that. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, it's so funny. The hilarious thing is the three of us all used to work for Scopely in our past, and I guess for you in present. So
yeah, no, everything goes through Scopely. Yeah, as Laura, you were there. When were you there?
I was there in the pandemic years. So I think it was a 2020-ish, maybe 2019 going into 2020.
Do you guys know where all the dead bodies are buried? And you can tell me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. All right. Excited.
Well, my time was like 16 to 18, early 16 to late 18. And I think the bodies are buried in the old office. I think you're going to go into the new. Well, actually, you're remote, right?
Yeah, I'm remote. So I'll go into all the offices whenever I travel there. And yeah, I'll look for those bodies then.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. They are so lucky to have you. I know that. I mean, what a great opportunity. They're on fire and they are incredibly lucky to have you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. So here is what we're going to cover today on the podcast. New technology, from new iPhones to new PlayStation 5 Pros. We're going to go into the details, not really, because actually no one really cares. Ubisoft gets a nasty activist letter. Cress isn't here today, so I'm just going to do a quick update on that, and I'm sure Cress is going to have thoughts on that. He's probably jumping for joy in Asia, where he's traveling right now, that this letter actually went through. We're going to deep dive into whether or not we're seeing saturation in the game industry from a core perspective, from a casual perspective, so that'll be interesting. And if there's time, I have just a few quick updates on Roblox developer conference, a few interesting things came out of it, but since the three of us are not deep into the Roblox lore, we're just going to hit some highlights after that. All right, a few quick shills. I just did a podcast and a YouTube video, since we are now in both feeds. I did a panel interview with some VC folks. The purpose was just, since I'm a little bit newer to the world of VC, what are some of the basics? And then what are some tips and tricks, and what are some secrets if you're looking for funding that, you could get from these different folks. So I just wanted to say thanks to Yere from Sisu, Sirkander from Transcend, and Anton from Play Ventures for sharing all their Yoda knowledge on the podcast. Let us know what you think about it, and if you want to do a kind of VC 202, since that was VC 101, and go a little bit deeper and hear a little bit more from them. So, Laura, what else we got?
We got one more. So one of our sponsors, Heroic Labs, they achieved a milestone. They conducted a public scale test. And as a reminder, what they offer are services for social multiplayer. So looking at having lots of players playing at the same time and making sure everything feels super fast, super quick. So they had a public scale test with Code Wizards Group, and they achieved 2 million concurrent users with no issues. So if you're looking for any sort of social multiplayer solutions, look to Heroic Labs.
Ooh, and done in the ad voice too. Well done. Well done, Laura. All right, let's talk about some things going on in the industry. So the Super Bowl event, or the World Cup event, if you're European, for Apple is always this September event. This is where they make the big updates, the big moments for new hardware. Usually there's a really big game announcement too. Back in the day, We got Wild Rift onto one of them. When I was at EA, I know that we used to like send a group of people who would be in some secret lair for a week, present, getting everything ready to get up on stage and present at these Big Apple events. So this one was a Tencent game. So I don't know if you saw it, but they're doing an open world RPG based on Honor of Kings. So it's called Honor of Kings World. So it came out with a trailer at the event. And so what was fascinating is that the game isn't actually shipping until next year. I'd have to believe that's a delay. Usually it's kind of a day and date. Hey, there's new hardware. Go play this new game on this new hardware I'm trying to sell you. So that seemed like a little bit of a miss coming out of that event. But the game looks beautiful, as it should, coming from a Tencent game on that IP. And other news, which was pretty funny, the EU is forcing Apple to pay about $14 billion, like 13 billion euros, in back taxes to Ireland because of the sweetheart deal that happened kind of like 8 or 10 years ago. Ironically, neither Ireland or Apple are happy about it. Ireland has been like a tax haven for Apple. And so now it's going to be one of the few countries in Europe to have a surplus in taxes. So I'll take that check if you need anything to spend it on. My people are from the Cork region. If anyone wants to like send me there to go say hi to my people, my dad's dad is like hardcore Irish. And so, the rest of it is Eastern European Jew. But, so anyway, let's go to the other hardware.
Yeah, let's talk about PlayStation Pro. So there was a announcement this week, a technical presentation by Mark Cerny. The PlayStation 5 Pro launches November 7th for $700 US. I think also they gave some international pricing, so it's things like £700 as well. The PS5 with a disc as a comp launched at about $500. And the PS5 Pro boasts roughly 45% faster GPU, advanced ray tracing, AI-driven upscaling. This was all covered in the presentation in great detail. And mostly in terms of the feature set, the way that they phrased it is that it'll effectively allow players to play PS5 games, existing players, PlayStation 5 games, in high fidelity mode, but now at 60 FPS. If you remember with PlayStation, you're allowed to choose between performance mode or fidelity mode, where performance mode runs at 60, fidelity mode prioritizes graphical fidelity. And what was interesting is that Cerny reported players actually preferred 60 FPS mode over fidelity by a ratio of 3-1. Overall, when you look at this and saying like, okay, now you're able to play high fidelity games at 60 FPS for about $700, there is definitely some negative response to this on pricing. And obviously this is just what players are saying. We'll see what they do come November. But $700 without a disk drive, with just sort of meager visual performance upgrades. They did a lot of like visual representations where they showed the two games next to each other. And I always enjoy it watching influencers being like going at it with like a microscope and being like, wait a second. Oh, wait, you can see inside of the building inside of Last of Us. Wow, the one on the horizon that you're running past and then never looking at again. So it's just interesting to kind of look at like what players value. Do they actually value 60 FPS? Yes, clearly. Do they actually value looking inside of buildings? Probably not. So it'll be interesting to see the performance. We'll talk about this, I think, closer to the launch, but I do want to show Reese Elliott's good article on the impact of this change. We'll link it in the description. It's from Media Research. Talks about the PS5. Media? Yeah. Okay, let's go with that one. But yeah, it basically talks about the impact of the PS5 Pro, mainly being for super fans, and that it won't really grow PlayStation's player base.
I don't know. It just feels like it happened so quickly. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I just pre-ordered or just like was waiting for my PS5 delivery, and all of a sudden there's another version. I don't know. It feels like it's too soon.
Yeah, you're getting old, Lauren. Like,
no, 4 years ago, girl.
I know, like life seems to go faster now that we're older. But no, I remember the day that I got my PS5, and it was about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, so like in terms of the console cycles, we're still on a pretty long console cycle.
Yeah, it's a really long one. So the cool thing at Riot was because we were thinking about making console games, yes, back in 2020. Valorant's finally out on console, so I guess it was back then. One of the things that Riot did was everyone got to choose a console. It was funny, you got to choose the Xbox Series X or S, PS5, or a Switch, and everyone was like, how about I take the new consoles that are...
Who got the Xbox Series S? Who was like, no, that's the console for me. You got the S? Why did you get the S?
Oh no, X.
Okay,
X.
good.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
You're right. That is dumb. But yes, if you're dumb, you could have picked that one. But no,
Yeah.
I got that one. And so on this, I was reading a little bit, and I saw our friend Matt Piscatella from Circana was looking back at the last Pro version and said that from a percentage of overall revenue, the Pro is only like 15 to 18% of the total revenue. It's very small in how it impacts things. I mean, I'm not an expert, and maybe when Crest comes back, I think last time he was like, "This is bullshit. This is stupid." But I'm not even sure why they do it. And $700 is like you're on your way to building a PC. Like, I guess I'm just curious.
This is what the player
stage.
response was. I think we can go into more detail later.
Okay, all right.
I don't think it's worth like diving into too much.
No, it's interesting. All right. So who wants to do the sad news?
I'll cover the sad news. There was some news this morning. Microsoft will lay off approximately 650 people further from its gaming team. Phil Spencer told employees this in an email to team members this morning of our recording. So truthfully, this is very hot off the press. We're stitching together the quick articles that we have, but I expect us to cover in more detail if there's sort of like debate topics in the future. The quote here is, as part of aligning our post-acquisition team structure, managing our business, we have made the difficult decision to eliminate approximately 650 roles across Microsoft Gaming, mostly corporate and supporting functions, to organize our business for the long-term success. I've heard this mostly impacts Activision Blizzard. I've heard this may have impacted one project at Blizzard, but we will confirm both those details. Again, this is hot off the press, and we'll cover in future weeks if there's sort of debate driving details that we want to go into.
All right, so I'll just read a little bit of this article from GameIndustry.biz. So we had talked before a couple weeks ago, mainly around Star Wars Outlaws. Crest was talking about how the stock was taking a hit, and I think we all thought it was a little bit unfair how much hate they were getting over the performance of Star Wars Outlaws, which, again, like a 76 Metacritic game-ish, I don't know where it is now, like that's not a bad game. And so the price has continued to kind of fall. So Ubisoft share price has fallen more than 50% over the last year, taking it to a 10-year low. And so the Wall Street Journal reports that one of the investors of AJ Investments and Partners has written an open letter to the board outlining its deep dissatisfaction with current performance and strategic direction of the company. The hedge fund is calling for CEO Yves and the board to take Ubisoft private or allow it to sell to a strategic investor. It feels that Ubisoft is a great undervalued company. These are all quotes, by the way, not me giving my own opinion. I think Crest might agree with this. Ubisoft at current state is mismanaged and shareholders are hostages of the family members and Tencent who take advantage of them. Management is focused on pleasing investors and beating quarterly results and not focusing on long-term strategy to provide exceptional experience for gamers. So I think this just kind of comes at a time where we're seeing a lot more activist investors. I don't know if you all follow Disney. What was happening with Disney at the time is there was also a activist investor kind of going after Bob Iger. And they ended up getting into basically, if you watch the show Succession, it was kind of like a fight to take over the board seats, and Bob Iger won. And so we'll see what happens in this case. Crest will have a lot more coming back, but it's really interesting to see this happen, a little like Succession game industry drama. I'm sure this would make for a great TV show that I would love to watch.
I have a quick update just more for Sony stuff. So one is Astro Boy, which just had an incredible launch and got roughly a 94 Metacritic. I've been playing it with my daughters, and it's been a ton of fun. It's basically like Mario Galaxy, Mario Odyssey, but for PlayStation 5. And Sony dipped it into a ton of nostalgia in terms of bringing in a whole bunch of Astro Boy-esque characters from all of their different IPs over history, including like going all the way back to PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2. Some interesting videos online of like even some of the deeper cuts, like Dark Cloud going way back in the day of PlayStation. There's some free DLC coming out later this year. Also on the PC console side, the interesting launch to watch is Space Marine 2, which just launched. And again, we've been talking a lot about the impact and predictability of wishlists. This is one of those titles that had a pretty incredible wishlist number going into launch, so it'll be interesting to watch. Effectively, Saber worked on World War Z, or World War Z for Americans, and was like an excellent, Left 4 Dead-esque 4-player shooter. This is now Warhammer Space Marine co-op shooter. So it's really interesting to kind of look at the performance differences, look at the attitudes of just how the market has changed versus when they launched World War versus now when they're launching 4K, and like how the IP of 4K has changed.
Yeah, the Space Marine 2 it's kind of all over. It's getting a lot of hype, a lot of good ratings, a lot of influencer coverage. So we'll talk about this a little later with saturation. I'll make a comment about is our industry ADD or ADHD, whichever is the new way to say hyperactive. I'm a little worried that this is going to see some, what Laura likes to say, a pop and drop, where everyone's on it for 5 minutes and then kind of moves on.
It is a premium game, so it will pop and drop. It's
For sure.
Inevitable. This isn't going to be even Helldivers, right? There'll be a growth and then a decline. The question then becomes now does everybody jump on building co-op shooters? Are we all trying to build Left 4 Deads again in this day
I
and
hope
age?
so.
But then you think of all of just the pendulum keeps swinging, right?
I know.
Right? And so what do we take from this? And what's the real takeaway from the market?
We talked a little bit about extraction shooters. It's the same thing. We talked about that last week. And yeah, Devin from Newzoo kind of heard us talking about that. And he wrote a piece on LinkedIn where he, did a deeper dive into extraction shooters the same way as everyone's kind of chasing that one. And I think we all have to be really careful about chasing the next thing. But let's get into that a little bit later. Sorry about that. So Laura, do you want to just walk through the top games?
Games by revenue in North America, August. We could play a guessing game, and I think everyone would get it. It'd be who do you think's the top? Well, Monopoly Go, clearly. Candy Crush is always up there. Royal Match is up there. Roblox. Actually, what is interesting, and I can't take credit for this, actually, Joseph Kim, in his most recent, one of his newsletters, he had a guest writer talk about Last War Survival, because on that list is Last War Survival as well as Whiteout Survival. And they actually broke down why they think Last War is doing as well as it is and why it's on this list. So it was a very interesting read. And for our breakdown of Whiteout Survival, we talked about how the onboarding experience was very, very good, easy, made for people that like 4X games, but don't know they like 4X games yet. So they kind of get you in slowly. It sounds like, just as a summary, Last War does that. Whiteout Survival does it a little bit. Last War does it to a greater degree. I would even wager a guess that's probably a very likely reason it looks like from Sensor Tower, it's from a revenue standpoint, it's actually going past Whiteout Survival. So
yeah, it was interesting because you and I covered Whiteout Survival, and it's kind of flattened out in terms of its revenue in North America. And the chart we're looking at is in North America. And then back in March, Last War passed them. And it looks like in August, they're starting to widen the gap. And, I think both of them follow the similar strategy of that, hyper casual fake ad, which actually isn't fake, because that is the gameplay that you come in and experience. And Last War, I'm sure you've seen this ad. You're running into the horizon, you've got the little guy, and you've got to pick, do I 2x my guys or 10x my guys? And then you kind of pick up weapons along the way, and almost like Vampire Survivor or Survivor IO, more and more enemies come at you, and that's kind of the gameplay. And so Whiteout Survival was a little bit different, because that one, actually, they were fake ads. They were completely bullshit. I'm going to run around a frozen tundra and collect stuff on my back, kind of like a township ad. But that wasn't actually the gameplay that you had. And so I think the difference here is that with Last War, they took a legitimate hyper-casual ad, turned it into the onboarding of the gameplay, slowly introduced you into the 4X, kind of like a bait and switch, or, if you want to make a drug analogy, it's like there's a gateway drug into getting you addicted to heroin. For sure. I think that's what's happened here. And they did it in an incredible way. And I think what we can all learn from that is, where you can help players really ease into a more complex experience that monetizes really well. Like that seems to be what's really resonating and leading to these top revenue franchises. Like, I think you could also argue that many of them are all casual, right? Like a lot of these top games from, the Monopolies, Royal Match, Candy Crush, Township, Coin Master, Pokemon Go, and then what's the last one?
Call of Duty.
Duty.
COD Mobile.
Yeah,
COD Mobile. COD Mobile is still up there. Shooter, Adam, are you excited? Off air, we were talking about how we got casual girl and hardcore guy on the podcast. Like,
Please
you
no.
You got the two extremes.
Sick.
But no, to be honest, I love that strategy, especially like on paper, in theory, like when talking about games, thinking about like how do you connect the explosiveness of like a hyper casual game and like the amount of downloads, the CPI efficiency to an end game. And like I think about mobile design, 5-7 years ago when we were thinking about these problems and how many dead bodies there were. Like there was tons of attempts of games trying to like hybridize two different genres and like, hey, we'll take an endless runner up front and then we'll turn it into a super deep RPG on the back end. And then it never worked, right? And then everyone said, oh, there's an uncanny valley. Endless runner players want to play an endless runner game. RPG players want to play an RPG game. And then that was the sentiment, like that you couldn't figure this out at that point. And now you're looking at it being like, no, we're in a mature market. If you do this right, you can effectively bridge between a survival game, right? Like up to a 4X backend, up to a hyper deep CCRPG backend, and you're seeing it with Idle, you're seeing it with a whole bunch of different gameplays. So I would love to dive deeper into like what are the hooks, like what has to go right, what are the things that have to be successful in order for that onboarding funnel to work? Because obviously there's hyper success stories, but let's not just look at those. Let's look at some of those failures and say like what's really has to be true in order for that funnel to work. So this is like my strategy muscle, like going at it, being like we can't just look at the one success story. We've got to figure out like what really drives this onboarding strategy to work.
Yeah, no, that'd be interesting to do that deeper dive because it's not even just 4X. I think the character collector aspect of it happens too. In both Whiteout Survival and Last War, it's not even just two hybrids, like it's multiple hybrids of genres that are really leveraging like the best of. Mm-hmm. And so you're right. It's like, what are those things? So
I just remember like 10 years ago, we were like all making fun of a Donahoe game that was trying to do like 3 games at once. And I was like, no, you can't do that. You can't create 3 games at once. And now it's like, no, you can. The whole market loves it.
Actually, you should be doing 5.
Yeah, you should do 5 now,
you should do
please.
5.
yeah, that's how we get it, right? Now we need to start adding 5 new games. Casual front end, shooter back end. Let's get it done.
This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful, it's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they'll interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance.
Step into the future of game monetization with Xsolla, the premier partner for game developers seeking to expand their reach and revenue. Xsolla provides a robust suite of tools designed to enhance user acquisition, manage subscriptions, and streamline payment solutions worldwide. Unlock new markets and maximize profitability through their customized, secure payment architecture and dedicated support team. Xsolla, powering game developers to achieve global success.
So I'm just going to like warn everyone, the types of articles that I like to pick up for podcasting are going to be less like news articles and more like philosophy articles about product strategy and really just generally strategy about the market. So there was an article written by Paul Kilduff Taylor, and we should link to it. I think he's an excellent writer. There's a ton of really great content on his blog. The title is Saturation Doesn't Exist, with kind of the tagline being like, can players really have too much fun or too much of a good thing? Or are we just making excuses to fail? So when I'm thinking about this, it's like, say we've all seen it, a game launches, it doesn't succeed. And then the predominant reason we point to say this game was a failure is it's because competitor X dominates this genre. That genre is all tied up. You can't touch it. And so, for example, like we covered Concord in the previous TWIG, and I think this is like, we can go right into this recency bias, right? Concord taken down after about 2 weeks, estimated about $1 million in revenue, 25K units. I feel absolutely terrible for the devs, by the way. Like, after 8 years of working on this game, I know it's being trod through the mud. So I don't want this to be another article that just kind of trods them through the mud even more. That was a difficult decision by Sony, but the right one at the same time. Like, this is a signal of like, hey, does saturation exist in this market? Because when we think of things like, okay, Concord versus Overwatch, the immediate sentiment is, well, it's because hero shooters are played out. You can't compete in hero shooters anymore. So then you look at games like Marvel Rivals and Deadlock, and are we saying that they're dead on arrival? Probably not. But what's the difference? Like how much does market saturation matter? And I think there's also sentiment of like things that this holds. So Pokemon Go, World of Warcraft, League of Legends, Clash Royale are all kind of subgenres that everybody uses as common examples of like, hey, genres get locked up by an incumbent and then no one else should try because it's just impossible. And then there's examples where that's not true. So Valorant going at Counter-Strike. Everyone's like, Counter-Strike's got it. No one can go after attack shooters. Valorant did it, right? Coin Master. No one should go after Coin Master. It's the only game that can dominate that space. Monopoly Go. Sorry, I'm already talking about Monopoly Go. I apologize. Oh, no. Candy Crush, right? You can't go after Match 3. You can't go after... let's go with Switcher. I keep calling it Bejeweled. Let's go with Switcher. But then there's Gardenscapes, and then there's Royal Match, right? There's always more room for that. Galaxy of Heroes, there's no more. Oh, wait, Marvel Strike Force. Oh, wait, AFK. Oh, wait, Raid, Shadow Legends. There's always a new CCRPG. And now we're talking about 4X. And I remember like 5 years ago talking about strategy and people in the 4X genre telling me, no.
Machine Zone.
You can't do 4X. 4X is done, right? Mm-hmm. There's no more room for 4X games. And now we're looking at it being like, no, there was definitely room. So you look back at that and be like, is there room for MOBAs on mobile? Is there room for hero shooters on PC console? Is there room for MMOs where you're like, is it actually just that no one's built a good enough game? And I'm intentionally being like inflammatory about this to spur a conversation. Because like on this podcast, we are typically quick to point out to those external factors. So things like Stormgate as an RTS has a genre ceiling. Souls games are a niche audience. Monopoly Go can't ever dent Coin Master. However, the outcomes are a lot more about execution than product market fit. So I'll start here with like my general perspective, and sorry for the rant here. The article here focuses a lot more on premium games and indie games, which I don't believe suffer from saturation. So I do strongly agree with this article. Players finish a premium game, and then they're hungry for more. After I play Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate, I want to play more games like that. And I look forward to the next one, right? And because those games have a start and end, that hunger increases. The one but here is that there's impact of competitive windows. So you can't just launch an Elden Ring competitor on top of Elden Ring. Obviously, there's share of voice and share of wallet in your launch window that matters. Live services are different. Subgenres can reach saturation. The only way to beat League and Dota is to build it for a different audience that you can retain and grow. And I think Deadlock is that kind of MOBA in shooter clothing that is a strategy to find that kind of blue spot in a red ocean. That's the way to go after it. Instead of saying, like, go directly at the king, now we're going to try to find that blue spot. So in general, what I'm finding is that product market fit matters more than saturation. So to win a genre, you have to understand your competition. You have to find a product thesis that resonates with what players actually value and separates you from the competition. So if we loop that back to my initial point on Concord, like I don't think Concord failed because it was a hero shooter. It failed because it was a generic hero shooter that didn't have meaningful differentiation and didn't spark an emotional response and create a differentiator that people were drawn to. And I think that's what drew the go-to-market down. That's what made the marketing worse. And unfortunately, that's the key reason for Concord. I don't think it actually has to do with the genre.
So on Concord, you think it wasn't differentiated at launch or at the conception? Sadly, the conception was 8 years ago. Was it innovative back then, or it just took too long? I don't know. What do you think?
I think in general, my experience with these things has been that a lot of projects in development, when it comes to the pitch phase, will talk about differentiators. And on paper, they sound really good. And then production realities hit. And then the slow degradation and erosion of what that differentiator is hits. And then you have all these differentiators, which we thought we would do, and then they get kicked down the road. So like my favorite example is what I call like social jazz hands, where like in every pitch deck I've seen, there's always like, and then we'll add social.
Social. Yes, I've seen a ton of them too.
Yeah, I know, right? Like we've seen this.
We're going to reinvent how players interact with each other.
Like, oh. But then ultimately, social is always added super late in development, and then you slowly get like erode that as your real true differentiator, and then you get to the realities of production. You're like, we can't add it.
Just throw guilds.
And now you're left with a generic thing, right? You're left with something that the differentiator is no longer there. I don't know what happened with this game. I know there's a lot of talented people that work on it, and I'm sure they internally were trying really, really hard to add as much differentiation as they could. But ultimately, right from that announcement, the player response was the player response. And just to shill user research, right? Like we've got to be able to find earlier signals of players being able to look at these games, understand enough about them, and then being able to signal to us like, hey, is this a real meaningful differentiator? Is this something that aligns with player values? Or are we actually headed right towards direct competition?
I called it like a hangover, but when you play a really good game, and this has happened to me recently with Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda's Tears of the Kingdom, and a remastered game, a JRPG called Live a Live. When I finished those games, all I wanted to do was play, like I wanted that same feeling, same experience, and I couldn't have it. And it actually made me hate games that I felt were subpar compared to that experience more. I was sitting with my partner, Mark. We played them together. He does all the battle-y stuff. And we finished Tears of the Kingdom, and he's like, well, what do you want to play next? Let's try this indie game. I'm like, absolutely not. The production quality is going to be nowhere near as good as the game we just finished. I'm going to get angry at it because I'm going to be like, why can't they just make as good of an experience as the one I just played? I agree. I think it's about product market fit. I think there's always a space you have to carve it out. And we get into the issue of, I can't tell you how many like clones games that are just not very good. And then and they're like, well, why isn't it doing well? Because it's not very good. It's just not very good. And I'll speak to match 3. The quality of your switcher is not good. Your levels are not good. The meta is not differentiated. I played 5,000 games just like this. Like when we talk about differentiation, there's a huge difference between what players feel is different and a different experience and when we design on paper, saying that this is a USP that players will understand. And I feel like there's not enough understanding. That overlap is not always clear. And what we want to design for and we think is huge and different, well, a lot of times players they're not even going to notice. They're still going to say it feels the same. And I mean, some companies do this well, some don't. That early product insights testing, where a lot of times players will tell you that. They'll be like, it feels similar. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen developers, and myself at times included, they don't understand it yet, or they'll cling to the little positive bits. But when players give us feedback, we cling to a lot of the positive and not kind of the, well, what are they actually saying? Do they feel like it's different? If it reminds them of this game, yeah, you had that in your like little slide. It's like Pixar meets Royal Match meets something. Like, oh, great, it feels like Royal Match. Yeah, that's not always a good thing. Like, it's going to feel similar, and are you giving them something different? That's literally nothing what I wrote. The only thing I wanted to add for this piece was there's a little bit of, I think, also that we don't do enough of, and it's partly you get it from playing competitor games, but I feel like an underrepresented skill that, at least when it comes to product and picking out what game, like you're going to invest $10 million into making a new game. What do? There's something in fashion called trend forecasting that's needed when you start approaching saturated markets. And that's how you desaturate them, is that you start to not only look at what players value, but what players are going to value. It's kind of like last tour. Like, we know you're going to like this 4X game. We know you have to eat your broccoli. We're going to give you little bits of it until you... No, but it's a little bit trying to predict what we think is coming next. Some people say they think they know. That's what we're all betting on, right? When we make a game, we're betting on what we think players want next. But it's very difficult, and also something I think is not as valued as it should be, especially in product and approaching a busy market.
I want to go back to something you said about insights, and I was going to do a huge plug for two things. One is One Team, One Dream. And so at this stage, when you are trying to figure out and forecast, what's next and what things are going, and develop a positioning or USP, unique selling points and differentiation, working with your marketing partner who understands audience and the market and market fit is the perfect time to have a marketing partner. It's also the perfect time to have a consumer insights partner, because what I love doing just in my day job now and my career is like, this is the part of games that is the hardest thing we ever do, but it's also the most fun, because you come up with something, you do consumer or play testing, and you figure out, like, are we getting there or not? And there are ways to do this at a very early stage. And I feel like the poor Concord folks might not have done this, or maybe they did, and it was in development for so long that they either didn't do it or they ignored the warning signs. And I always tell people, and sorry, I'm going to do a Scopely thing here. This is in the past, Adam, though, is one of the things that I respected most about my Scopely time, as he covers his eyes and his ears like the monkey who see no evil, is that we cut games. Phil and I talk all about cutting Breaking Bad, or there are so many games and IPs and things that we did that we threw out there and didn't work, and we cut it. And the balls to do that is something you don't always see. And I think the learning from a Concord or from this is that you need to do a couple of those things. So the other thing that we don't often talk about and we don't think about as much is, how do you break through the clutter? And how do you get eyeballs on something new? There are 15,000 plus new games on Steam every year. Imagine the App Store is times 100 on that. Like, aren't there like hundreds of thousands of new games? So it's incredibly expensive to launch a new game, especially if there's an IP, then you're paying for the IP. But what was interesting is we just talked about Last War, Whiteout Survival, and I'll bring up Match Factory, one that I got wrong, really, really early on, because we were like, oh my God, it's another one of those freaking pull the shit off and put it on the bench, 3D matching games, right? So these all have had success on mobile. So I'll talk mobile for a second here. And how do these non-brands, they're not even leveraging an IP, how do they have success in a crowded space? Like, all of those 4X and Puzzle are saturated markets. And a lot of it goes back to what we were just talking about earlier, which were fake hyper casual ads. Kind of kidding, but kind of not kidding, right? So it does seem like there's a lowest common denominator kind of working in some areas of gaming right now, especially on mobile, not as much on HD, PC console. So this simple gameplay that you utilize in your ad with a very early onboarding that, is there, it baits you in, and then it switches you to something a little bit more complex. All three of these. What also they have is that massive bank account, so that when they do hit their KPIs, the bucket isn't leaky, they're retaining folks, their LTV is there, LTV is higher than their CPIs, then they know they can start scaling. And so, for on mobile, I think gone are the days, Laura, of your shark fin or the pop and drop. And what we're seeing now, I think, are these launches, kind of grow over time, like slow and steady wins the race. And on the HD side, it does feel like it looks a little bit different. Like, to me, again, it feels ADHD. Players are jumping on the hype train of some of these things. And you're right, Adam, maybe it's because they're more premium. You don't have as much live service. But I feel like an HD player is, remember the Pixar movie Up with the little dog? And it was like, squirrel! And he was like, oh, squirrel! Oh. And honestly, it's how I feel every day now that I'm older and I can't pay attention to anything. But if you think about finals and how, oh my God, it was going to be the next biggest thing. And then Pal World, oh my God, that one too. And even Black Myth, I think we're going to get out of that. In the window of that people hold their interest is just a couple of weeks and they're on to the next thing because there's so much content that's where I feel like the saturation piece kind of is hitting us a little bit. I don't know if you guys agree or not, but I do see like this difference in mobile and PC. Is that how you all are seeing it?
Like on PC console, like the slate this year is weaker than last year. So when I think of what we were thinking of last year, when it was like Diablo 4, Baldur's Gate, Starfield dropping, Armored Core 6 happening all at the same time, right? Yeah, we had ADHD. This year, you're like, oh, there's not a lot of things coming out. Well, wait, Power World, what is this, right? Helldivers dropping in a relatively open window in February. And even this month, like there's Star Wars Outlaws. Sorry, Ubisoft. But like it made space for Space Marine 2. As a player, I'm relatively bored of PC console games. So now I'm picking up Space Marine. I'm picking up indie games on Steam because I don't really have a lot of other things to play right now.
Oh, interesting.
I'm having that problem on mobile too. I am running out of interesting games I normally like, just standard puzzle games. And I've started playing the kind of the lightweight, you take that hyper casual gameplay and you match it with like a polished version, try to get like more puzzle players. So sorting the liquids, hexa sort, all that stuff I've started to play more because I feel like my usual rotation is starting to feel stale and I don't know what else to play.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. So maybe they're just not breaking through the clutter to you. Maybe you guys aren't watching ads. It's too expensive to market these things. Let me just do a quick wrap up on Roblox just to get these few quick announcements out. Number one is the CEO came out with some really bold goals to reach 10% of the global gaming market's revenue and 1 billion daily active users. And it sounds like a lot. So 3 key areas, communities and party features. So they're rebranding groups to communities and adding, to our whole social jazz hands, like they have this shit figured out. If you want to know what social is and the future of social, you got to watch what Roblox is doing. They're going to add voice chat. They're going to have all kinds of things coming. This is what the next generation is getting used to. And I think as developers, I'll shill a podcast I'm doing and maybe next week, I'm going to pull in 3 developers in the game industry that are 30-ish and under and ask them, what is it like to make games for the next generation? Like, how are you approaching this? Because we're all dinosaurs now. And I want to make sure that as a dinosaur making games, like I'm in touch with what the next generation wants from gaming. All right. So the other one was this affiliate program. So this was pretty interesting. You're going to be able to like incorporate Shopify and sell real world stuff. And then the final one, which I do think is interesting to developers here, is that you're going to be able to sell your experience for real dollars, $10, $30, or $50, and receive 50, 60, and 70% rev share. So they're upping the rev share. They're allowing for real dollars, not just Robux to purchase. And so this might be a little bit of a game changer for people to want to develop experiences because rev share has sucked so badly. Them giving a better rev share might be actually interesting. Some AI stuff to follow as well. So that's just Roblox update from the developer conference. I'm sure many other people want it look like fun. Anything there, guys, before we sign off for the week?
I was just going to joke, reading this, Discord and TikTok were too expensive to buy. So they're basically building similar experiences in the game themselves.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is becoming a social media network for, Gen Alpha, basically. You just happen to be able to play some games. Poor Snap, if they hadn't killed all of their gaming, a couple years ago, maybe, and poor Snap isn't just they're on the struggle bus right now. Like AppLovin is doing better than Snap as a social network. It's pretty crazy. All right, everybody. We will see you next week. Next week, we'll have a bunch of the cast back. And it's our 300th. And we'll probably do nothing because everyone's on, out this week. So we'll see what happens.
Great.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry's best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand. Or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.